So, with this global actor, they come under the banner of a global terrorist movement. So, Jemaah Islamiyah is our example of a global terrorist movement. Anyone want to guess which religion it's going to be affiliated with? Islam. Yeah, radical Islam. These are a group of people who are taking a really radical view of what is otherwise a fairly peaceful religion in terms of the Quran. As usual, here are your headings. Aims, roles, power, influence. Let's get straight into it. What do they aim to do? They want a pan-Islamic state. These guys want a whole new country or state that spreads across the whole region. So these guys aren't Indonesian, they're not Malaysian, they're not Filipino. They want a whole new Islamic state that goes across the whole region that follows strict Islamic law. So Indonesia is majority Muslim, but it doesn't follow Muslim law. It's a country like us, it's secular. The government isn't religious. The laws in their country aren't religious laws, just like our laws aren't religious laws. These guys, Jemaah want a religious state where all the laws are religious laws. Now that's quite radical. So every person within these borders must follow these laws from one religion. That's why it's radical. The second aim, to revive a pure form of Islam. So all religions have many permutations, many versions. Sometimes they're watered down by some people. In other cases, they're made really strict and orthodox. These guys want a really pure form of Islam, which is incredibly strict to the letter of the word. Is this? No, next slide. Role. And this guy was one of the leaders. I chose this image very specifically. It does make him look a little bit nuts, and that's kind of why I chose it. Their role, they want to establish a base of followers. They're trying to recruit followers. They are terrorists. They want to recruit more terrorists so they can be more effective. And their role is to perform terrorist acts. So this is what they do. Remember, role is always about the doing. They perform terrorist acts. They try and recruit more terrorists. Obviously, very different roles to the UN or Human Rights Watch, but that's the nature of this global actor. This is what they do. A video. So with all these PowerPoints, this is the YouTube video. So when you download the PowerPoint, you can link to the YouTube video. This link is a link to my computer.
Mass had begun, and the choir was singing, when suddenly there was a blinding flash. A homemade bomb had torn through the church in Medan. Small nails mixed in with the explosives injured more than 20 churchgoers. Unknown to Indonesia and the rest of Southeast Asia, this attack was the first real act of terror by the Jemaah Islamiyah. Since then, the group has bombed many other targets. A string of churches on Christmas Eve, the Philippine and Australian embassies in Jakarta, a shopping mall, the JW Marriott Hotel, and the resort island of Bali, twice. Today, the Jemaah Islamiyah is Southeast Asia's most feared terrorist group and is responsible for an estimated 300 deaths. But who are the militants behind the masks? The answer lies in Afghanistan. On Christmas Day 1979, the Soviets invaded. Afghan guerrillas fought back, starting a decade-long resistance movement, or jihad. The jihad was fought and finally won by a brotherhood of Muslim mujahideen, which included recruits from Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, and even Singapore. This armed struggle became the ideological inspiration for many of Asia's Islamic militants. Among them was Nasir Abbas. He fought in Afghanistan before joining the Jamaah Islamiyah and rising to be one of its top regional commanders. Over a decade, the weapons and explosives expert trained some of the region's most deadly terrorist bombers. Nasir was studying at an Islamic school in Malaysia when his teacher offered him the chance to go fight the Soviets in Afghanistan. It was 1987. He was 18 years old.
Saya anggap ini seperti dream come true gitu, ya kan? Seperti karunia dari Tuhan. Tapi karena saya ini anak muda ya, semangat gitu, ya ingin tahu apa itu jihad apa semua. Ketika dengar nama Afghanistan, dapat tawaran begini, saya anggap ini suatu peluang ya yang tak boleh saya lepaskan. Karena saya sudah terbayang kalau sebut nama Afghanistan saja, saya sudah terbayang saya pegang senjata, saya langsung berperang.
So, a brief introduction to where this group got its background from. This guy was the leader. He was since locked up. Abu Bakr Bashir. So their power is very obvious. Very different power to human rights group. I've chosen these two because they're contrasting. Their power is hard military power. The power to blow things up. Large-scale terrorist bombs. That's their power. You've got bombing system. That's the which was packed full of Australians partying, having a great time. You've got the Marriott Hotel, a symbol of Western. The Australians, they're Western, and they want Western influence out of Indonesia and that part of the world. So they think that somehow we're watering down Islam and all the things about it that they love about it. Yes, they blew up. They let off a bomb just outside the embassy, and the brick wall took most of the shock. Then the person who died was a local who was on the street because the bomb went towards the street, not in. Yeah, the Bali bombing or bombings, these three bombings. And the good way to remember them is 02, 03, 04, the capital of Indonesia. I don't think so. No. Certainly there haven't been any attacks in Australia. On Australians, and I said there weren't any attacks in Australia. Oh, yeah. And, yes. Why wouldn't they? We've got really powerful anti-terrorist groups. We're really good at intelligence. I might not like all of our spy agencies, but they do a good job of protecting us. Spies. I think they would probably try and attack us if they could, but it's going to be too difficult for them to get here, to get the bomb equipment. I want to keep moving right above us. So here's the map. Good. I think this is like
it's in that little background one. That's long skinny thing. Yeah, it's like that.
And some of those people are terrorists who say things like this. Well, first of all, their mind, what do you call it? They get these kids when they're young. And they just feed them this propaganda from when they're very, very young. And they manipulate them into believing certain things. So there are radical Islamic schools throughout Indonesia and throughout many Muslim nations. Look, there are radical Catholic schools as well that teach some pretty bad stuff as well. So radical religious schools are in every country. In this particular case, they're taught to hate Westerners, hate Australians, hate non-Muslims. Well, when we do terrorism, you'll see that we have a lot of influence in Indonesia. We spend a lot of money building schools and trying to change their culture, and they're resistant to that. So we've built 2,000 schools in the last 3 years in Indonesia to stop this. We want to stop this. We want to stop people saying, we decided to settle accounts with Australia, one of the worst enemies of God in Islam, and the Mujahideen brothers succeeded in carrying out a martyr operation with a car bomb against the Australian embassy, etc., etc. We advised the Australian government to withdraw its troops from Iraq, so they've got a problem with Australian troops in a Muslim country like Iraq. This was a spokesperson. So this is an example of the hatred of JI and their desire for a pure form of Islam. I don't know. Influential. They are incredibly influential at challenging states' sovereignty. Indonesia can't control its territory if they've got groups like this, recruiting people, planting bombs, threatening the tourist industry. And that can be a big hit to the economy when people no longer travel somewhere because of terrorism. Egypt basically shut down as a country because bombs started to go off in Egypt and no one travelled there because they were scared. So their economy was like 70% or 80% dependent on foreign dollars from tourism. And once that money stopped flowing, the economy just collapsed. So these bombs are a threat to Indonesia's sovereignty. They're very influential at recruiting. And if you want some examples of their influence, you can refer to any of the bombings, but the Bali bombings is the most obvious. The successful bombing of Western sites and the death of Westerners in Bali. All of that is about the influence, the effectiveness of this group to achieve its goals. Remember, if you're judging them according to how well or how badly they've achieved their goals. This isn't about whether you like them or not. Let's pretend you don't. How effectively they've achieved their aims and goals. Okay. Limitations. They've been less influential in recent times. So once the Bali bombs went off, Indonesia got serious. And they got in touch with America, they got in touch with Australia, and the 3 states got together and formed this really, really good counter-terrorist group called. We trained them. America funded them. No, reverse that. We paid for them, America trained them. And they operate in Indonesia. So they're Indonesians who are trained by the best counter-terrorist group in the world, and they're really good at catching terrorists in Indonesia. Catch terrorists. They track them down, and then they go in, and they go in hard. So they just shoot up everyone. They're really, really violent, really aggressive. Yes, it can. You can end up having, well, in this case, they're government controlled. And the Indonesian government is very secular, incredibly secular, very Western, very pro-democracy, very capitalist. Even more than us. They're more secular than us, their government. Maybe I went too far. So they're less influential now because of counter-terrorism. Some examples, suspected terrorists arrested in recent years, you can just say. That degrades their network. And let me, which one? Let's do this one.
On SBS World News Australia with Andy Park, reading news reports in the early 2000s, you could be forgiven for thinking that the once little-known militant Islamist group Jemaah Islamiyah was one of the biggest threats to Australian national security. But 10 years since the Bali bombings on Paddy's and the Sari Club, the leaders of the group and those behind the bombings are now either in jail executed or were shot by police. Leah Farrell is formerly a senior counter-terrorism intelligence analyst with the Australian Federal Police. She was the Al-Qaeda subject matter specialist and worked as the senior intelligence analyst in Indonesia at the AFP's forward operating post in response to the second Bali bombings. Leah, it's been said that at the time of the 2002 Bali bombings, Jemaah Islamiyah's threat was completely underestimated. What's changed in terms of counter-terrorism intelligence since then?
Well, I think obviously the resourcing of the counter-terrorism community increased dramatically after that. The knowledge base of those working in the area increased dramatically, and also the willingness of the government not only to resource the section but to actually pay attention to what was being said. I was up in Indonesia after the second Bali bombing, and as a part of our efforts up there to engage and support the Indonesian police, and I remember briefing the
Sorry, I know the audio is pretty terrible. If you click on this link here, that's to the YouTube video, and the audio is a bit better. What she talks about is Indonesia getting their house in order, setting up a counter-terrorist group, researching the issues. So building the knowledge base, she said, finding out more about who this group is, where they're being trained, which schools they're recruiting in. So she's talking about Indonesia working with Australia and the US together to diminish the influence of JI. And there's another link up here. I suggest you open both of them in your own time. So grab the PowerPoint and watch them both. They're about 5 minutes each. As with all the PowerPoints, of course, there's links in them for you to look at in your own time. Questions? So there's two very short articles. Subject reader, and they're both just summaries of who JI are. They're one-page summaries. I have spares for those who didn't bring their subject reader with them. Yeah, often they take them themselves and they use them to recruit people that send them out to other schools. Look how good our terrorists. They want to recruit. They want to get more followers. The more legitimate they say, the more they've got serious training, they've got guns. The government can potentially chuck who they are.